a content analysis tool, and that is a fairly specific methodological meaning. The entire purpose of Leximancer is to let the data generate a transparent model, and that transparent is there quite deliberately. We don't build AI software which makes black box models. It's not about replacing the human, it's about empowering human analysts. So it's to let the data generate a transparent model for you to inspect and do sense making on. If you've used NVivo, it's kind of the other way around. Instead of spending a potentially large amount of time going through data, creating a model like you would in NVivo, in Leximancer, it generates a model quite quickly, and then, but you then do the sense making after the model's been created. So it can still take you some time doing that sense making, exploring, reading into the data. Think of it as a lens or a telescope for you to look into the data in a kind of disciplined way. So it shows you, well, the map, and the concept map is it's a good name for it. I know we all talk about concept maps, well, maybe we don't, but map, if you think about a map, it's a way of seeing territory you haven't been to before. It shows you the continents, the rivers, the mountains, but it doesn't show you the terrain. It doesn't let you talk to the people, but it does show you where to go to look. So that's what Leximancer is like. It's like a map of the information content that you're faced with, and it can take you to where you need to go to answer your research question. So that map is actually a very important word, really. So it's to support efficient sense making. So content analysis is dividing text, usually text, into chunks, pieces of text. It could be one sentence, it could be two, it could be a paragraph, it could be a whole newspaper article. And then you're identifying the presence of ideas in those chunks of text. And then you can count those, and then you can do more. You can do much more than just count. Counting was just the first generation of content analysis. They went quite a long way beyond that. But you still have things to do. You still have to get your data, and that can involve sampling. Do I have enough data? Does it cover the population that I want to create a model for? And I think it helps to be aware that you're dividing the text into chunks. Leximancer does it by default into 2-sentence chunks, but they don't cross paragraph boundaries, and you can change those settings. So if you want bigger chunks, if you're doing interviews, you might want maybe 5-sentence long units of analysis, and you want them to cross the paragraph breaks between each of the turns in the interview. So we often use that for interviews. And again, Leximancer decides for you what your concepts are when you use it in automatic mode. It tries to find a modestly large set of concepts which characterize most of the data that you give it. And but that's a strategy. And if you don't like that strategy, if you want to add some concepts, or if you want to create a code book around a very particular topic, a theme within your data, that can certainly be done. Like, you can take control of Leximancer, and you can point it in different directions. When we talk about a code book in content analytic terms, we talk about a book which defines the concepts that you're interested in measuring in the data. And so how each of those concepts is defined. Now, there are various ways you could do that. Originally, it was you could give the code book to your research assistants, and they would go through and code the data. They would learn the definition of each concept, each code, and then they would classify each piece of text in a reproducible, repeatable manner. It's like good marking of assignments or exam question answers. A repeatable application of a rubric is very much like that. In Leximancer, there is a code book. We call it Thesaurus. And here's an example of a thesaurus entry. So these things called latent concepts are discovered. They're groups of words that the machine learning discovers in the data, and it finds a concept, in this case rifle, and it finds the words, the vocabulary collection, which defines that concept in the data. And why do you have a code book? Well, for Leximancer, it's so it knows when it finds a paragraph, a piece of text that's talking about a firearm, it knows the vocabulary to look for. If they're talking about these words in collection, then that piece of text is probably about a firearm, so then it can code it. So that's the coding process. And that slide is just about coding. And once you've coded the data, you can count how many times the code appears and how many times it appears with other codes. This is an example of coding. It's Pride and Prejudice. Divide the text into chunks. We've got a code book which has some concepts in it, which you can see there: family, female, male, manners, feeling. And then these codes are applied to each piece of text. So once you've got coded data, you can do quite a lot with it. You can do frequency analysis. How many times does a concept occur? And you could do that this month versus next month. And that was the first generation of content analysis. The second generation was how many times do two concepts co-occur? That's called relational analysis. And then the third generation of content analysis was called cognitive mapping, if you like. And what you do is you take the co-occurrence counts of your concepts and you use those to build a concept map. So here we get into that idea of building a map of the terrain. We used to, back in the 70s and 80s before GPS, you get out the map, you'd lay it on the bonnet of the car and you'd look at the terrain and where are the roads, where are the big cities, how far do I have to get? And it makes you aware of what the terrain looks like. And that's what a concept map is trying to do. What are the themes? These bubbles are your ideas, your themes. The connections show the major highways. And by that, I mean the major narratives. So this is about narrative. And so there's a narrative which connects Volkswagen Beetle to Fun to Drive. And you can see longer narratives here, which go through inexpensive gas mileage, 30 miles per gallon. And then there's distance, which is, okay, I'm over here, I'm thinking about practical things like traction and mileage, but over here, there's aesthetic ideas of appearance and colors. So there are things going on in a concept map. For a cartographer building a map, there's a science to that. And there is also a science, or at least a methodology, to building a concept map. So yeah, Leximancer is a system which performs most of the steps of content analysis for you, or in support of you. You at least still have to decide your research question, select your data, and make sense of the final model. I think most people have seen a concept map. This is the map. The concepts are the building blocks for the map, and the relationships, the links between the concepts are the glue or the string that ties it all together. And then once the map is built, these bubbles are actually hierarchical clusters. So these bubbles that you see on the map, which we call themes, are simply hierarchical clustering of the concepts that make up the map. And that's why there's a slider at the bottom, the theme size slider. It lets you change the cut point for your hierarchical cluster. And if you've ever done hierarchical clustering in software like stats software, you'll know that you can cut so that you could have just 3 very large general themes, or you could change your cut point to look lower at a lot of very specific themes. So that's what's going on there. It's not, we didn't invent the framework. Some of the algorithms we did because some of the text processing wasn't available, but the theme work is very much based on content analysis, cognitive mapping, hierarchical clustering of the map. And if you're interested in looking at hierarchical clustering and concept mapping, it's a pretty advanced technique. probably the best. There are several sub-methods, but the most mature one is multidimensional scaling. And you can find big books on multidimensional scaling, which take you through this as a method of analyzing data when you have a lot of variables. Like if you have 100 variables, measuring all the nuances, or many of the nuances within your data, which is what we do with this sort of content analysis, then this sort of concept mapping is a very useful way to get a bird's eye view of what's going on, a visual model, if you like. Probably don't need to dwell on the types of things you could do with Leximancer. Publications, analysis publications, analysis surveys, analysis of media, interviews. Book on content analysis, Weber. It's nice, it's pretty short, tells you what you need to know to get started. Of course, there are other bigger books about content analysis that you can find. For a citation on Leximancer, our peer-reviewed publication, which we would recommend if you're going to use as a tool in publication, would be the Behavior Research Methods paper. There are some very good examples of using Lex in the literature, so you don't have to make up the analysis method and the publication method unless you want to. These and more are on our website on the science page. And as we say on the science page, you can always go to Google Scholar and search for Leximancer and tourism, or Leximancer business, whatever subdiscipline, education, and there's quite a lot of articles out there which uses the tool. So so they're the slides. Our website is info.leximancer.com. Yeah. In Leximancer. Actually, I'm here already. So let's open up a project. And I'm going to jump in the deep end of the swimming pool here with, where is it? Yeah, so this one is kind of the hardest sort of analysis, where it's just text, right? So if you're just analyzing text, then and you've only got one map to look at, that's fairly hard work. That's real qualitative thematic analysis where, for example, here I have a concept map. I just have one concept map of a large body of text. It's actually about 22 days of transcripts from a Royal Commission. So this is the most demanding situation you'll find for qualitative or text analysis. There are easier situations. So, if you have two sets of stakeholders and you divide the data into two, then if you have two concept maps, do a project for each of your stakeholder groups, and then comparing and contrasting two of these concept maps is actually it's a lot easier, because you can look for themes which are similar, have similar meaning, and holes, places where one group of stakeholders don't talk about something and the other group do, or you can look at different emphasis. So that comparing and contrasting is much easier than just, here I've got a concept map, what do I tell the client? Other things that can make it easier are if you put the tags. Leximancer has this function called tagging, and you can do it by either dividing your data into different folders or by using files as tag names, or if you have interviews, you can code the different speaker in the interviews. So you can put these tags on a map, and they allow you to do compare and contrast as well. That's called mixed methods analysis, where you have categorical variables, like there could be demographics, could be gender. You compare the two genders, or maybe three or more potentially these days. Or you can compare postcodes or ages. And you can put those categorical variables on the map. And I can, that's covered in the manual, and I can show how to do that also. And again, that mixed methods is easier than just flat out qualitative single map analysis. So how do I do that sort of single map analysis? Well, I do it very similarly to the good Leximancer publications. There are some that do it as well, and we do it fairly similar ways. We take the map, and like you would with multidimensional scaling, or even factor analysis does a similar thing if you ever use that. You try and you see why it is the way it is, why it's like in this case. Think about it at the high level first. This cluster of concepts, which is what you're looking for. Actually, why don't I show it that way first? If I hide the themes, I turn off the hierarchical clustering, we just get a set of dots. Each dot is a concept. I know it looks like a word because you have to call it something, but if you ever go and look in the thesaurus, you can see how each of those are defined. And we go and look in the thesaurus. That building concept I clicked on is defined by a whole list of weighted words. So, this is picking up places in the text which have some of these words that are together. So, for example, if they talk about a 4-story building was demolished, then that's going to trigger the coding of the word of the concept building, and then that's going to be represented by this building variable on the map. Anyway, that's a bit of an aside. So this is the basic framework, the skeleton of the map. They're concepts that co-occur with other concepts in the text. And you can see that concepts co-occur a lot because this is 21 days of transcripts around a topic. So it's heavily interconnected. Safety is mentioned alongside a lot of other topics within the text, but not with the same strength. And so if I click on safety, I can see over here that it's that safety co-occurs with information quite a lot, and company and risk. But some of the concepts don't occur with safety that often. So there's a spectrum of strength of co-occurrence. This is relational content analysis right here. So here we're looking at the relationship between a concept and another concept, like system. So what is the relationship between safety and system? We can click on the 51. That shows me 51 pieces of text that characterize that relationship. So you don't have to, if someone says to you, like a reviewer says, well, how do you know that this model is valid? People love that word valid. And I suspect they often think that you can't answer because validity is really hard to test. Well, I think in this case, if you say that every link, every relationship between a concept and another concept in this model is supported by a number of text segments, there's a count of those, and I can see all of those. And if I want, I can export them as well, read them, export them, present them. So that relationship is valid, right? It is a valid relationship because it's, well, so long as these pieces of text validly represent that relationship, but you can inspect it and you can show it to someone. So, our behavior research methods paper that I mentioned before, it talks about the methods. It goes through a validation process of several different ways of validating a content analytic model. But this particular one of just looking at the data that supports each part of the model is a pretty good way to start without having to go into algorithms and Bayesian statistics and whatever else. So I think that is worth using because you can use this to get a reading list of concepts which support safety systems as described in this data. So that's relational content analysis, and you don't have to go beyond that if you don't want to. You don't have to use this cognitive map. You can just stay with looking at so that button I used there was this ranked view button. This takes me back to the master list. So this is just the frequency. how many text segments are coded with concept pipework? Well, it's that many. And you can move down the ranking and you can get emphasis from this. This is the first generation of content analysis. It's that, the frequency counting. And then if I click on a concept, I can do relational analysis. I can look at what that concept is related to and find those stories. And then those relationships between the concepts, they're all projected into this concept map to get the third form of content analysis. And you can see here the links. So if I click on fire, I see the relationships, and they're all quantified over here. The relationship between fire and explosion, that link there, is here. And there are 47 text segments that support it, and I can read down into those. So this is a way of, you can start here with a very high-level bird's eye model of the data. But don't stop there. Dive down and inspect its relationships and read the text. Okay, so that's the concept map. Now, the observation here is if you kind of look at the forest instead of the trees, you can see that this is longer than it is wide. That's actually really important with this sort of analysis. And perhaps the first question you should ask is what are the major bulges, the major shapes within the map? Now, this is where you can start taking control of the hierarchical clusterer. If you dial this up to a high level, let's say take it up to 63% in this case. We could even go a little higher. Let's see, where do we have to go? Might not be able to get it down to 2. There we go. So if I take it right up to 83%, it's a little bit of a helper just to see, I want to characterize this factor, this dimension of the map. It's a dimension of meaning. If you like, people talk about sentiments, or what they call is semantic differentials. This is a semantic differential. It travels from one extreme, it's like an x-axis on a plot, but this is an axis of some idea. And it's up to you to work out what is this axis of meaning. So at this end, what are we looking at? We're looking at material things. We're looking at the world, a building, a floor, an oven, a valve, very concrete. Okay, so it feels very concrete. That's what they have in common. Let's look up this end. What are we looking at here? We're looking at things, legal procedure. We're looking at evidence, and there's the concept evidence there. We're looking at documents, at statements. So you could call this, perhaps you would call it the law, legal procedure, legal evidence. If you get a little philosophical, you can see that this is a virtual construct. These are people in wigs and black gowns sitting in a wooden paneled room, trying to organize the world, trying to make, in this case, make factories safe for people. So this is legal procedure, if you like. This is the world of engineering reality, of ovens, of explosions, of gas tanks. So there's a dimension operating here. And if you like, these two clusters, one called paragraph. So what do I mean by called? So there are names for each of the bubbles, and this one's called itself paragraph. This one's called itself pipework. If you remember nothing else that I talk about how to analyze this sort of thematic map, just remember you need to try to rename these themes. Don't stick with the themes that either the theme level or the theme name that Leximancer chooses. Take control of this slider and take control of the theme names. So your task is to come up with a better name for this bubble and a better name for this. And how would you do that? Well, certainly not by guessing. You might have a look at the concepts contained in it. That will give you an idea. But what I really recommend and urge is to use, to drill down to the text. And we've got the first tab on the right-hand side is called the synopsis, or the Analyst Synopsis. Now, if I select it here, you can see that it's actually reflecting the theme structure that I've chosen. Because I chose to have only 2 themes, there are only 2 items here. Just as an aside, I would make sure this is a high level of detail before you go into it. So now we've got the pipework theme, tells you how many texts support it. The paragraph theme, you can see the colors align with the clusters. Pipework, this tells me a list of concepts that are inside this cluster. So each one of these dots is in this list. And you can kind of read this off and get a bit of an idea of what that one's about. We're going to have a look at the paragraph theme. We can see the same list of concepts, within that paragraph theme. Beneath that, there are the top 5 text segments that support or are classified into this theme, this cluster. And you could just read those, but what I would suggest is if you want to get a feel for what they're talking about, click on the list of concepts here. If I click on this list, that drills me down so I can view all these 9,000 text segments that support this particular theme of legal procedure. You wouldn't read all 9,000, probably, but you would read until you stop being surprised, till you get to that, exhaustion or saturation. You don't, you see different stories, different narratives appearing. When you start seeing the same narrative again and again, you could probably stop and say, well, I've sampled that sufficiently to get an idea of what this theme is about. So you can see here, it's about legal procedure. It's about running an inquiry. It's about lawyers doing things. It's about the rule of law, if you like. And so you do your reading there, your sense making, and then we can go back to the Analyst Synopsis and look at the other end of the map. And same again. What's this about? Well, this is very concrete. This is the engineering or the physical reality. So you could write those up as two chunks of your report. One going through this pipework theme, give it a better name, give it a description in your own words, and then maybe you pull in some pieces of textual evidence to support that. And then you might talk about the legal procedure. And then an interesting thing to do is to look at the intersection. So we look at the intersection between the legal, the rule of law, inquiry, and the physical reality. You might wonder, how do people in wigs and gowns, how do they attempt to control the world? And what you can see in here is inspections, industry inspection, places and premises. There's risk assessments, health and safety. People are definitely involved in this process. So if you like, this is compliance. You see HSE, which I think is a Health and Safety Council of some description. I haven't looked at that in a while. I'm not an expert on this material. So this is how these two themes interact. So I guess in summary, the times that I've seen people use Leximancer to discover a novel framework or novel aspects to a framework, when they've dialed up the theme size to a fairly high number. So you've got just maybe 2, 3, or 4 themes, and then see how they interoperate. How are they constituted? What do they mean? How do they interact in the data? So that's the way I think is the most successful way of using Leximancer's concept map. And as you say, it is a hierarchical map, and this is a hierarchical clustering. And if you want to see how that hierarchy appears, we can do a reveal. If I hide the concepts, okay, we've got just the bones of the thing, the main highways between the cities, but we don't know what they're called. If you bring in the concepts a little bit at a time, you'll see the first ones that come in are the tops of the hierarchy. So like the mountain peaks, you see pipework, LPG, and tank, and they own this region. And then if you bring in more, you've got the building. And we can see the inquiry kind of owns this region here and the paragraphs of evidence. And this area here is about risk and safety and the premises. So, you don't have to use these bubbles. You can use it. This is very old school. Look at the regions on the map, look at the hubs. And, I've certainly used maps where I've drawn circles, drawn a bit of a shape around this and say, okay, this is about the material, the LPG system in the building. And this is about risk assessment on premises and health and safety. So, you can take control of it as much as you like. And you find a lot of people in the literature who use multidimensional scaling will do just that. They'll look at a map kind of like this, and they'll characterize the regions to do their analysis of factors. So let's get a map, put some color back into it, I guess. So let's say there's some chance that I might want to publish with this map. Something more interesting. All right. So this is showing me legal, company premises, compliance, and engineering. So maybe I like that, and I want to reproduce that map. The button here, which looks like a little photograph above the map, is where you can save an image of it. Now there are some options for image type. There's PNG, portable network graphics, JPG. Don't ask me to remember what JPG stands for. But again, that's and TIFF. These three are what they call bitmap graphics or pixel graphics. It's like a photograph where you have just dots of color. These are okay. They're simple, but you can't edit them. You can't edit them easily. And if you want to publish later on and your publisher wants much higher resolution version of it or wants a grayscale version of it, it's harder to change, and you actually can't increase the resolution of these much at all. So if I save a PNG and I save it at 800 by 800 and the editor wants it a bigger resolution, 6 months later, when it comes time to publish, you've got a bit of a problem. You have to go back and find your project and generate a new one. Whereas if you save it as SVG, scalable vector graphics, that stands for, then you can do just about anything you want with your exported image. So what I would say is if you want to save a picture of a map for anything like publication or even reproduction, because you can drop an SVG into a Word document these days and it will work. I would recommend saving it in SVG format. So if you do that, then it saves an SVG file somewhere, save it on your disk somewhere. If I save that, put it on my desktop. Now I have to go find my desktop. Oh, should be okay. Here we go. So I go and find the file. So there's my SVG file, and you can open up in various software. Someone mentioned Boxy before. I use Boxy. It's only about $9 or $10. It's pretty affordable to open the file. You could use Adobe Illustrator. So if your university or school has Adobe Illustrator, you can use it to open an SVG file. There's also a free piece of software called Inkscape, an open source free, which can let you edit SVG files. So as long as you've saved that SVG format version, you can see it here. you can then do pretty much anything you want with it. It's clustered. The SVG at the moment is grouped, but I can go down, and if I don't want this one here, I can move it somewhere else. Maybe that bubble I don't particularly want. Maybe I don't want this either. It's a bit of an outlier. Maybe I want to rename this theme. So let's grab that name, put it over here, and then edit it, call it okay, I don't want that theme there. So let's get it back into, delete all of that. There we go. So, and so forth. You can change the color of these. You can make them large if you want. So it's fully editable. And, I could turn it into grayscale. And if my publisher says I wanted a very high resolution, I simply go into export in my software and export it at, so 400 DPI should do. That's pretty high resolution. And I can export the thing at a different resolution, a higher resolution than you might have originally done. And that can only really be done with these sorts of vector graphics files. So, graphic artists use these all the time. And so I recommend exporting as an SVG. For systematic literature review, yes, it's very good. You get all your PDFs. Well, there are a couple of ways. If you get abstracts, if you get a spreadsheet of abstracts from Elsevier or Thomson or wherever you get your data from, LexisNexis even, you might get a set of abstracts as a CSV, a spreadsheet. You can export that as from Excel or wherever as a CSV file and upload that into Leximancer and analyze the abstracts. And there are ways that you can include, like the journal or the first author as tag variables in your analysis. So you can see what particular authors are talking about in your concept map, and you can look at what authors publish with other authors in your concept map. Or alternatively, if you have a whole lot of PDFs that you've downloaded, what I suggest is get a folder on your disk for your literature. Under there, you could create subdirectories or subfolders, maybe for different areas of research, or maybe different journals, or even if you want different years, you could do like the first decade, the second decade, the third decade as different folders, and put the PDFs into the folders they belong. So you could put all of the 2000 to 2010 decade, you could put all those articles in a folder with that name. Or if you have topics or journals, you can organize your PDFs into folders, give the folders sensible names. And then in Leximancer, what you do is you turn on a thing called, in the text processing settings, it's called folder tagging. And then for every folder, every subfolder in your data area, maybe it's better if I show you. Here we go. So here's some data grouped into, find it. So this is what it looks like. So this is the parent folder called stem cell data. And you see I've selected that folder to be analyzed. But underneath that, there are subdirectories. So you can see there's a folder for each political party. And then under the Labour folder, there's a file for each speech. And these are all Hansard speeches on a particular piece of legislation. So I've organized the documents into folders by category and put all these folders under a parent folder, and then I drag the parent folder across. So I can analyze the whole lot. But what it lets me do, it lets me turn on folder tagging, and you see that's ticked. So now I have available to go on the map, I have a categorical variable for each of these folders. So there's a folder for each of the political parties, and I've selected two of those, Labour and Liberal, put them on the map. So now on the concept map, I have a folder for liberal, a tag variable for liberal, and it shows me, what are the themes that are closer to the Liberals? How are they framing the debate? And the Labor politicians, what are the themes nearest to them? How are they framing the debate? And you can see certain themes here. People, Parliament, research is very close to Liberal. And if I click on Liberal, I can see the concepts that are front of mind for people from the Liberal Party. I can see, those ideas there, and I can drill down to those to see what Liberal politicians are talking about embryos, and so forth. I can also, if I look in the rank view, you can see the frequency count, so the presence of each of these categories in your data. So Liberal have more content, a little bit more than Labor in this particular map. So when you're doing literature review, if you put your PDFs into folders, you could use this too to look at particular authors or particular universities or particular dates or year ranges. You can organize your data that way. Yeah, so, okay, that was quick because I'm aware that we're running out of time and people have to go. But that's getting started.